afternoon, one goal. All right. Why would I start that way? But that's an open question. Why would I start that way? With that particular song in that way?
She was unapologetically Black. She was in your face with her lyrics. And she was representing herself, her culture, and she was being true to who she is.
Why does that matter?
Because that's what we should do for our fellows.
Why?
We should empower them to speak truth to power.
Okay. Good. Okay. So y'all are ready. Culture is courageous. Are you ready? I want to start by being really, really authentic. I saw that we were to be our true selves. And I'm doing something that I generally don't do. I usually just kind of just go and start. But I've been feeling inspired by a lot of the authenticity that I've been seeing. Beyonce at Beachella. Cardi B. I'm just really inspired by what that represents and what that says about where we are energetically. And so I'll tell you the things that I'm about to do, I generally do on my own, but I'm going to bring it into this space. The first thing is I want to give praise and adoration to my ancestors for opening the way for me and for the genius and sacrifice that they put forth and allowing that gift to be a part of my coded DNA. The second thing I want to do is start this space with an intention. I center my energy and divinity and call for universal balance. Now is truth. Now is justice. Now is freedom. Now is love. Now is liberation. Now we each release our fears and find our peace. We follow our universal assignments and manifest our destinies for the collective ascension of humanity. Now is evolution, and it is so. Ashe. I always feel nervous energy when I'm in a group like this. One, because I have anxiety around being speaking in front of groups, but mainly because, and I learned this from an elder, I take my spiritual assignment very, very seriously. I don't know how many days I have, and I don't know what the future holds. I just know that I am assigned to a very critical role, and that is to speak to the energies and spirits of those who are around me and charge us to be fearless. And so that is what I aim to do with this talk.
This is the point where, I'm a priestess of Oshun and Ifa, but Yemaya gave me a very important taboo. She said, don't run around telling people what you know, but if somebody asks you a question, ask them if they want to hear the truth as you know it. And then if they say, yeah, tell them the truth, no matter what the consequences.
So, in the wisdom of my elder, Mama Yeye Louisa Tish, author of Jambalaya, I ask you, do you want to hear my truth? Unadulterated as I know it. Is that a yes? Okay. All right, so first I'm going to start with a story about this woman. I wanted to start this way because it speaks to a little piece of culture for me, as a descendant of Africans, that we don't really discuss, but I think it is critical to bring this up in this exploration of courage. So on my birthday, March 6th, Pisces.
Pisces.
Hey. I was in this week of like experimenting with my energy. So I've recently in the past few years started to notice that I have like this mental energy that controls me, but I also have like a gut vibe spiritual energy that usually tells me what to do, but I don't listen to. And so the past few years I've been in this experiment with myself of let me try to follow this energy more than this one. So for my birthday, I was like, all right, I'm going to shut my brain off and just literally move as my body tells me to move. On my birthday, my body moved me into my office, and on my shelf, there's this book. That book had been there forever. I have a lot of books that have been there forever that I have not read. This day, I bring this book out, and I start to read it, and I'm like, oh, I felt like I looked in the mirror and found myself. And so then, after I finished the book, I was like fangirling Louisa Tiche. I find her on Facebook. I send her a thank you. I'm like, thank you for this book. I feel like you've reached into my soul, found a 6,000-year-old person, and brought that person back to life. Thank you so much, right? She didn't respond. But in the message, at the end, I said, I intend to meet you. 2 weeks later, there's a tag on Facebook, and a friend tagged me to this conference that's happening in New Orleans. It was called the Roots, Rocks, and Ring Shouts Symposium on African American Spirituality. The opening speaker, Louisa Tiche. So I'm like, I'm there. This conference just happened Friday, so 3 days ago. And you should know about me that I don't believe in accidents, coincidences, or mistakes. I believe in divinity. I believe that everything happens on purpose. I believe that we can speak things into existence. But I also know that these beliefs have been shut down in the history of my folk in this land. So I get there. She does this amazing piece around her bravery in being a woman who practices indigenous African spirituality in the Western world. Now, if you know anything about indigenous African spirituality, it has been demonized and still is. So when you hear about things like voodoo and Santeria, yep. When you hear about these things, oftentimes you hear other things come along with it. It's dark magic, it's demons, it's all of these scary, gloomy kinds of negative connotations that come along with it. And so she told this story about what it was to find herself on that path. And so I'm sharing this because when we go into this conversation about culture, we got to be willing to ask some very critical questions about what we've been taught to fear and why. I also just want to name that I am a person who, I went to college and I'm a practitioner and all those different things, but the way that I actually am gifted to lead is through spirit and energy. But I've been coached to shut that down and lead with, I have this bachelor's and master's and all of these other things. I'm an executive director or whatever. But those are actually not my geniuses. I got really good at those things because I have to be in this world. My genius is actually through my energetic being. So I wanted to start there because when we go into this conversation about culturally relevant pedagogy, I think we really got to back up and have an exploration of culture. Because I don't know if we actually know quite what that is. I think we know the surface, but I want us to dig deeper. The other thing that I want to call out is, obviously I'm a Black woman, can't erase all this magic. But given that, I'm also talking through that lens, and I just want to be cognizant of that because I know that that can be received in a certain way. But I do believe that to really understand culture, you have to do self-study first to appreciate anything about anyone else. And so I'm using this as a model, not just to explore the concept, but to offer to you, this is what I believe the work looks like. I also believe that anti-Blackness is the root of oppression. If we don't solve that, we don't solve racism, we don't solve patriarchy, we don't solve heterosexism, There's a long history to the ways in which anti-Black racism has been used as a template to oppress other people. And so we have to do that work to do all work. So, culture is courageous. Are we ready? We gotta be ready to face our fears. There are 3 things that I think we need to focus on. And I'm coming to these 3 things after like hundreds of engagements with folks and doing consulting work. There's a lot of stuff I can tell you, a lot. But I think these are the 3 that we need to focus on. Number 1, we gotta get real about the records. And I'm talking about historical and present day. Second, I think we have to stifle respectability and start being raw. And third, we need to take radical action to rebalance power. So let's start with getting real about the records. Our problem is political, not educational.
A culture is a way of thinking, a way of attending the world, of perceiving the world, of classifying and categorizing the world, of ordering the world, of processing information, and of evaluating the world. When we say then that the Europeans decultured us or distorted our culture, we are also saying then that the Europeans have distorted our modes of attending the world, our modes of experiencing the world, our modes of classifying and categorizing the world, our modes of processing information that comes from the world. So there's no little wonder then that we are having problems in what some people call education, particularly as it is Eurocentrically designed, that our children are perceived as having problems in thinking skills and math skills and science skills and so forth. Because ultimately, you see, culture provides you with a frame for thinking. It provides you with a structure for organizing information, for classifying information, for evaluating information, you see, for processing information. And when you distort a people's culture, then you distort their capacity to appropriately organize information and deal with it.
That was the voice of Dr. Amos Wilson. He is a Pan-Africanist, but he is also a psychologist. And he speaks a lot to the genius of Black children. So if you're interested in someone who focuses on genius of Black children, that is one of the folks. Can you see this image? Is there someone who would be willing to read what that caption says?
The Haitian Revolution was dreamed up and carried out by enslaved women and men, most of them African-born survivors of the Middle Passage.
So I wanted to share this image in particular because it's connected to part of the reason why culture and education has been separated for children of color for a very, very long time. The power of culture and education has always been known. So this idea of culturally relevant pedagogy is not new. It's very, very old. But for some of us, it might feel new. And that's because we might not know the history of what has happened. As early as the 1600s, we have had Black-led classrooms, Black-led spaces for learning that were quite successful. The problem was they were successful in ways that were not conducive to control. The success would lead to insubordination, insurrection, and independence. One of the most famous being the Haitian Revolution. When that happened, in North America, we started to see even more lockdown and shutdown of Black education. So when we have this conversation about culture and why it's so radical, what we have to understand is when you actually can conceptualize the world through your lens and start to understand the problems of the world through your lens, you start to realize how you can solve problems through your lens, and that might and most likely is not going to align with the status quo. So the work of culturally relevant pedagogy is radical work. And that is why I say again, culture is courageous. Are we ready? Culture, no matter who it is for, is created to solve problems for a particular group. And I wanted to come to these records as well. So outside of the records of culturally relevant pedagogy working, just not in the way that this society might want it to work, there's also culture around how to maintain systems and ways of being, the status quo that we have today. What I have up here is the document of the white man's burden. How many of you know about that? Heard about it? Raise your hand. Okay, most folks. What is the white man's burden? Wait a minute now, I saw all those hands and then we got quiet. What is the white man's burden?
An ideology that God had bequeathed white men who followed this knowledge and wisdom their job to go out and civilize the rest of the world, and in doing so subordinate populations of color and exploit their.
Perfect. That's exactly it. And I wanted to bring this up because when we think about culture solving problems, what problem does this culture solve? It does solve a problem. What is the problem that it is solving? Let's do this. Take a second and talk to someone right next to you about what you think. What problem does this solve? When you have a culture like the white man's burden, what problem are we solving with that culture? So what did you come up with? What problem does the white man's burden solve, that culture? What does that solve? So the combination of, we need to get these resources, so we're going to just say we're helping them out. And then on the flip of that, I don't know none of this that y'all doing. It's foreign to me, so I need to fix you. Let me help. Quite right. And that's what the culture pretty much was, and still is. It didn't stop. In the 1700s, we were saving the heathen. In the 1800s, it was a savage. In the 1900s, it was mental inability. So you have the eugenics movement that led to the IQ tests, that led to the SAT and ACT that we still use. Yeah. Right. And then in the 2000s, and starting with the 1900s too, we have the poverty movement. So we're always still trying to fix and save, but not address the pillaging, killing, and stealing that's happening. It's service for sanity. So the second thing I wanted to jump into was stopping respectability and getting to a place where we can just be raw. And this is the scary place because I found myself in my work tiptoeing around things that I should just be able to just say flat out because they are our history and they are happening. But I tiptoe because we don't know how to be raw. We have to be respectable, but why? So I had to put this in here. I was like, Beyonce's coming into the she's coming into the session. There was a think piece written by Miles Johnson in the New York Times about Beyonce and the end of respectability politics. Now, the end of respectability politics actually started before Beachella, but I'm gonna let him slide because it's Beyonce. But he talks about Mama Tina and this question that she had for Beyonce about why she was going to do her performance the way that she was in front of a predominantly white audience. And this quote that fed my soul before coming to speak today. I've worked very hard to get to the point where I have a true voice. And at this point in my life, in my career, I have a responsibility to do what's best for the world and not what is most popular. All right, so I'm going to stop there just for the sake of time. Sorry. I love Cardi B. I love Cardi B, but I looked at my time and I was like, uh-oh, we got to move. So, but I wanted to share that clip because I'm about to go into this piece right now, and I imagine it might make people feel a way. But so I just wanted to frame it, okay? Cardi, in that interview, was speaking to an intelligence, right, that we don't recognize in schools. And what happens to a lot of our children is if they show up with a different type of intelligence that we don't understand, we put them into these categories, and we say something is wrong with them, and we don't take ownership and accountability for our inadequacies. And so I wanted to frame that and then go to this, okay? So this might get me in trouble because my whole livelihood is set up on this. My whole consulting framework is set up on helping people fix this. But I got to call it out, okay? So when we are assessing proficiency in intercultural relations, and I'm putting performance in academics there with students because that is intercultural. We have curriculum and tests set up by white folks, European descendant folks, mostly, right? And then we have children of color who might not identify with that culture, who have to perform. That is intercultural, okay? Given that, when children don't perform interculturally, what happens? By high-stakes testing, we put them into these struggle stories of how they don't perform and how they're not making it and how they're not graduating and how they have behavioral disorders and all of these different data points of their deficits and why they won't make it, right? So we have all of that going on for children. What happens with adults, though? This is where my whole job is set up. Adults who don't have intercultural competence yet, we are patient with. We have all kinds of excuses. They're well-meaning. The intention was good. We don't have any kind of data around it, though. No kind of data around the performance of people who don't have intercultural competence, but are doing all kinds of damage to people's psyches and emotions. People take that stuff home when you're interacting with people. Like, they have to go home and heal from that. We're having impacts on people, like real impacts on people's lives, but we don't talk about that in data. We don't demonize our adults. We give them educational supports. We hire consultants. We pull in people to do the work. We give them grace. Why aren't we doing that with our children? And we're holding our children accountable to our inadequacies. Again, they are doing that because we are doing this. So I just want to ask, like, are we ready? You know what I mean? Like, are we really, really ready to face the fears that we got to face to do this work? And the question that I have here at the bottom, I want to make sure to ask, we got to figure out what's happening in our wiring that leads us to automatically think about deficits in children before we think about intelligences. Like, when we can't figure out how to work with a child, how come we never say, like, perhaps this child is gifted, and I haven't figured out how to meet that gift? We go the other way. Why? What is the wiring? How do we get there? I'll tell this quick story about my nephew because it's relevant to this. This year, my nephew is in the 2nd grade, and we had to go in for a parent conference, me and my sister. The teacher tells us that he's behind in reading. So I was asking, like, okay, what is he doing? Break it down. And she's like, yeah, he just takes a really, really long time to write down his words. He's very particular. So I started hearing myself in this story. I was very, very particular as a child. It took me a very long time to do my work because I don't like marks and stuff on my paper. I like to write my letters a particular way. I was very particular as a child I grow up and find out that's called anxiety. Didn't know that as a kid. I just thought I was particular. Jonathan is not reading and all of this kind of stuff, yada, yada. I babysit Jonathan. He's asking me questions. I give him the answer my mama used to give me. Go look it up. I don't know how to look it up, TT. I show him how to use Google. He's typing his little words into Google, and then he's reading his answers back to me. Jonathan is reading words that are at the high school level. So I'm like, pause. How is he behind in reading when I'm listening to you read words that I know I taught to high schoolers? So I asked him about what he doesn't like about reading. He breaks down crying. I just doing it. I'm like, that's a lie because you were just reading in there. What's up? So he goes and he's crying. I just want to read Captain Underpants. And I'm like, did you tell your teacher? Did you tell your mom? Blah, blah, blah. So we switch out his books, chapter books. Guess what? He tests again. He's above reading level. What do you say? But this is what's happening to our children. And I just, let me keep it pushing. The third thing is we have to take radical action to rebalance power. And this is where, in my work with consulting, this is where people tend to get stuck. It's easy for people to understand intellectually that we have a problem and we need to do something. And even in our core convictions, we feel like we need to do something different. And so we have the belief set to do it. The challenge is when we get to the action part. And I'll give this quick story. Wendy Kopp came to Dallas maybe, what was it, a year ago, 2 years ago? My time is running together now. But she was being honored. And while she was there, they brought all of the alumni from Teach for America to have dinner with her after. And she was sharing with us like just some revelations that she was having about things that she would have done differently with Teach for America now that she's working Teach for All. So we're having the conversation, and then a statement comes up that always comes up in conversations around ed reform. And the statement was, you know, the problem is it's just so complicated, so it's gonna be a long time before we figure out the solutions. And then I felt all of this, because I'm an energetic being, I felt all of this stuff happening in me. And I was like, I can say something right now, or I can be quiet, because this is not the time to go off in a room full of all of these important people. But I decided to say something. And I said, this is not a complicated problem. And the solution is not complicated. The people are, though. The problem is land was stolen, bodies were stolen, labor was stolen, and we created wealth from that. Now we have an imbalance. There are people who benefit from that imbalance and people who don't. We just got to rebalance it. That's all. That's it. It's pretty simple. The challenge is, though, we don't want to actually do the work necessary for ourselves to rebalance that power. That is what's complicated. We have precedents. We have reparations happening. We had it happen in South Africa. We had it happen in Germany. We actually had it happen here with Japanese too. We just don't want to do it. So let's say that and get real. And so I offer this because when we get into this conversation about action, I have a lot of conversations where I'm like coaching people and they're like, yeah, the executive director won't do this, or white folks won't do that, or whatever, right? We have these conversations with ourselves about what can't happen because what somebody else won't do. And the way that revolution and change works is not what other people do. It's what you do. It's not comfortable, it's not easy, and it's not, we have to be willing to face the fears that we have around our reputation and criticism. And it's actually a pretty privileged space to be where our fear is around our reputation. Because there are people who walk outside and can die simply for walking. So if the risk that we have to take is our reputation. It's a very privileged risk to take. So I'm just saying, when it gets to the work, let's really start to think about the action steps that we have to take and not just the intellect and the belief sets that we have to espouse to prove that we are woke or down. So I offer, we've had enough apologies, we've had enough tears, and we've had enough white fear. What we need now is respect, re-education, and reparations. And so that work, if we can just start the conversations, let's do it. I'm not saying that it's going to happen overnight. I'm just saying, can we get to a point where we're not so afraid? Like, even when I say the word reparations, right, I can feel the energy. That word feels a way in this land. Why? Why though? You know, like, I'm confused, right? So like, I want us to get to a place where we can actually start to check ourselves and check, like, what is this fear that's coming up in me? What is the history of that? Where is it coming from? And why do I have it? Why do I house it? What do I do about it? That's the work. It's internal. So I offer these last things in regards to like action steps. The first thing is study your cultural history. Often when we start thinking about culturally relevant pedagogy, we're thinking about like, I don't know the culture of my student or my friend or whoever, right? Part of the challenge is we can't conceptualize culture until we really understand the culture that we are in. And so you got to start there. Then go study your students. The second thing is to analyze your identity and assess how you measure genius. And all of us have to do this. I remember the first time I had to assess my genius, I was 12. I was with my teacher, and she checked the mess out of me, man. Because I thought I was so smart. I was a straight A kid, and I didn't know how to speak in the lingo of my hood. I'm from Pleasant Grove, and there's slang being used in Pleasant Grove that I did not understand how to use. She switched the test on me, put that slang on there, and I failed the test for the first time in my life. And it taught me a real quick lesson on what genius is. It's not always in regards to like these diplomas and degrees. Like there's multiple intelligences, and we need to be able to assess that. And a lot of times we've had to shut down our own different geniuses, and that's why we do it to other people. And so assess your identity and find what are your multiple intelligences. What are your geniuses so that you can pull those out in other people. Privilege does not equal power. This is a big one. We, in this conversation around social justice, there's a lot of talks about access, right? Like, and I don't want to knock the importance of access. I think it's a thing. We need it. But the thing is, once you have access, if you don't have power, we're just flunkies in a social club. We can't do anything. So we need to have conversations about how to shift control and power in spaces so that we can have actual impact and change. It's not enough to have a face in the space. We got to want more than that. And the big one for me, the one that I wish we would teach in schools, is reading our energy. And I also flip that to say energy. I see some people who know. That energy. Like, there's a skill set outside, and this is where I started that story, right? With moving from here to here for a second. There's a skill set around our vibe, right? The way that we feel around folks, the way that we feel in conversation. When we get checked, why do I feel? I feel some tension. What is that? Now, if we were able to hone our skills of actually monitoring and being aware of that energy, then we could do some real investigation and work. We can transform ourselves in the realest way. Because then we'll be able to say like, oh, wait, when she said that, I felt a way. How did I feel a way? Let me look back into what happened in my childhood, or what happened in my ancestry, or what happened in my neighborhood. You know what I mean? So I can understand where this reaction is coming from. versus what we have right now is a lot of intellectual battles, a lot of conversations that are wasting breath and not getting stuff done. Let's learn to read our energy. And that way we can do the work of balancing energy. Because I really believe that when we're talking about injustice, that's what we're talking about. So, to recap, we got to face these fears. And in doing so, we need to get real about the records, stop respectability and be raw, and take radical action to rebalance power.
We don't really either know what it is we're saying, or it's become a conversation replaces action. Instead of people today talking about courageous actions, we talk about courageous conversation. And I'm like, wait. I understand that it's important to have conversations, but when did courageous conversation overtake courageous action? And to go back to the initial point I was making is that I was giving this speech where they were talking about equity. And so I said, I'm going to assume that many of us who are sitting in here don't understand the difference between equity and equality. And that if you say that you're for equity, then you're saying that you understand that the most oppressed amongst us must have more than just equal. So my point is that even words like that are in that theme, the question is, when you hear that, what does that mean to you? And most important, what action does it inspire in your soul to do? Because at the end of the day, if we're going to have all of these conferences and all these meetings, but our children and our community continues to be oppressed, what's the value of all of this?
So true. That was a conversation that I had with Dr. Fuller before speaking. I was telling him I don't know what to say. And he said, you get in there and you just be real. And so I wanted to close with his voice. He doesn't know that I recorded the conversation. I wanted to close with his voice. And before I do, I wanted to make sure that we had time to set an intention. I started the space with an intention. I would like for us to close with intention. And so I'm going to ask for that question about what action is inspired in your soul. I want you to locate your energy and determine, are you right now in kind of like a conviction space where you're like, my beliefs are what I'm centering on right now? That's what I'm thinking about. Are you in a thinking space where you're feeling kind of intellectual, you want to do some research? Are you in a feeling space where your emotions are kind of like up here and that's what you are feeling right now? Or are you in an action space, social space, doing space? What I want us to do is actually physically get up, if you are able, and move to the corresponding corner in the room. So that would mean this corner is thinking, if you're in a thinking space. This corner over here is believing, if you're in a believing space. That corner back there is the feeling space. And this corner over here in the blue would be our doing space. Once you get to your space, what I want you to do is share what's happening for you right now and what you're thinking your intention should be, whether it's for this time, this summit, or ongoing, but naming an intention for yourself, to somebody else, to hold you accountable. Because once you put it in the ether, into the world, it is a thing. I believe in the spirit and power of words. So let's rise and move to a space in the room that correlates to your energy. I was just told to wrap it up. So I will quickly close, if I can have everybody's attention. Closing with the words of another mentor of mine, Dr. Kimbrough. He said, we didn't choose to be here, so we didn't choose these circumstances, but we were chosen. So what are you chosen to do? I'm chosen to inspire and invoke our energies, and I ask that you choose to follow in your spiritual assignment. Thank y'all so much for giving me this opportunity.